I'd like to answer a question from our Instagram Q&A, which was, how do you train effectively for elite competition without sparring partners? And in my opinion, unfortunately, the answer is that it's not possible. Not that it isn't possible to train, not that it isn't possible to improve, but that for a higher level of sparring competition, you absolutely will need sparring partners to train off of. The problem becomes there's no decision making without an appropriate sparring partner. The action-reaction coupling effect that we're looking for, the judgment of distance, timing, adapting to different strategies, pace, tempo, ring position, all of those things, it doesn't really happen unless you have an appropriate sparring partner. But we still have an issue, because someone wants to train, they want to get better, they want to compete at an elite level, but right at the moment they don't have access to sparring partners. So what do? Well, the first thing that we can do is say, let's prepare the system physiologically and psychologically for the event. So physiologically, you can look at the challenges that we face in the event. We have 2 by 2 minute rounds repeated up to, typically at the moment, 5 times in a pretty competitive division. That will get you through to a final. So if you have 5 intervals of 2 minutes by 2 minutes, rest and recovery periods varying between a half an hour down to maybe 3 to 5 minutes between your matches, that's a physiological challenge that we can define, we can prepare for, and we can prepare a system to adapt to. Secondly, you can look at psychologically, what will you need to do to prepare yourself to compete at that level. And there's an awful lot of psychological skills training you can do, but at the very, very least, on a technical and tactical level, you're going to need to know what does the opposition look like, what are their preferred techniques and tactics, what techniques and what tactics am I going to need to employ in order to be successful, and develop a roadmap and a strategy around that. Again, coming back to getting yourself some practice, and as much practice as possible, where decision making is a factor. The things that you can do even without training partners is, number one, compete an awful lot. Try to get yourself to competitions as frequently as possible, even if the style or the system isn't 100% match for what you're doing. So if you want to compete in ITF Taekwon-Do at a very high level, you may end up traveling and competing in kickboxing, in full contact kickboxing, in various other Taekwondo styles, just for the ring time, for the time on the mat, to have opponents that are presenting challenges to you that you have to solve. Another thing that you can majorly do is visit other clubs where you know there are people, even if you can't do that on a regular basis. Develop good relationships with instructors in other clubs and get to those clubs and train with the people there as often as you can. You can travel to national team squad training sessions if those are something that you have access to, or regional squad sessions if that's something that happens as well. Moving on from that, what do? Well, you can make a friend or train a friend. So find somebody who's in a similar position to yourself that's geographically somewhere close to you so that you can work with them. If there still isn't anybody available just at the level that you're looking for, you may have to work with somebody and help them to come up to the level that you're hoping to get to as well. And therefore, both of you are going to be looking to improve together. It brings us to the last point, which is you very often have to work and train with sparring opponents that aren't exactly appropriate to you. They're not, for example, if you're a female fighter, you may only have male fighters to train off of. As a senior fighter, you might only have junior fighters to train off of. As a 52 kilo fighter, you may only have, fighters in 60, 70 kilo range to train off of. And that's a practical reality. So you will have to structure your drills and your constrained spars and your games to ensure that both people have an appropriate level of challenge that's going to work for them and improve their sparring ability. And that takes a certain amount of skill and imagination, but it's certainly doable. So that would be our recommendation for how to work around the difficulties of not having appropriate sparring partners.